Hello everyone, and welcome back to the finals of the 1971 Candidate Series. It's Game 7, Bobby Fischer versus Tigran Petrosian. If you've been following the match so far, you know that Fischer won first game, Petrosian won second game, then three of the following games were drawn, and then Fischer won the previous game with the black pieces after a very long struggle, and Fischer really created a masterpiece on the board to take down the Iron Tigran with the black pieces. So now it's a completely different situation in the match. Fischer is leading by a whole point, and he won against Petrosian with the black pieces, something not easily accomplished. And now he has the white pieces. So now it's a completely different mindset for Tigran, I'm sure, as now he has to catch up to Fischer. He already caught up to him once because he took him down in round 2 immediately after Fischer won game 1. But as I said, it will be a bit different because now Fischer did win with the black pieces, and let's just see how things went. It's really an interesting game, and this is actually the one I made a year ago. Some of you already saw the video. If you haven't, I will still put a link to it in the description below if you want to check out the older version, and also, an excellent opportunity to compare channels. To get in the mood, here is a nice photo. There you have it, Fischer with the white pieces, Petrosian as always posing for the photo. Like we said, whenever you see a photo of Tigran Petrosian, he will always look very nice in it. Especially here you have this profile photo of Petrosian. Now that is a nice photo. Fischer's is also nice, but that huge smile on Petrosian's face, that's really something else. So without further ado, Fischer opens with, well, e4. We have c5, Petrosian goes for the Sicilian defense, knight to f3, e6, d4, c captures, knight captures, and now a6, the Khan variation of the Sicilian. Bishop to d3, we have knight to c6 and knight captures, b captures on c6, and Fischer castles here. We have d5, it's a normal response, you don't want a backward pawn on d7. And here is a very interesting moment in the game. Fischer plays c4, and c4 is an excellent move if you like playing positions such as these. Here with c4, Fischer will definitely create an isolated pawn in the center of the board for Petrosian, and will try to create a target of it that will that he will use to attack for the rest of the game. So this is basically deciding what the character of the game will be. So here it doesn't matter if you capture with the black here or here, whatever you do, you will either have an isolated A and C pawn, or it doesn't matter if you capture here, you will also have an isolated A and the C pawn. So here after c4, knight to f6 was played, and here we have a series of exchanges in the center. C captures, E captures, pawn captures. It's a very interesting, knight captures on d5 seems like a better idea. White create an isolated pawn in the center, but it's actually not possible to avoid this, because, for example, bishop to e4, and you will force an isolated pawn regardless of what black plays. For example, queen a4 check, you trade queens here, and then you go rook to d1, again threatening to capture here. And even if you do something like bishop to d6 to try to unpin, still white will simply capture. After you capture, knight to c3 is coming, and white will capture here, and there's no way to avoid pawn captures on d5. If you move the bishop, then you get bishop to f4, and now you're completely lost. There's no way to defend this. If you put the bishop back, simply capture. Now if bishop captures, knight captures, or you can simply capture here, and then you're gonna lose a piece. So without getting too much into this, pawn captures on d5. Knight to c3 by Fischer, bishop to e7, and now queen to a4. Fischer gives this check, and he doesn't allow black to consolidate. And now you can block this check, with some different moves. For example, you can go knight to f6. Although there's really no point in doing this, you're completely losing here. First, white can capture here, and then you're completely lost. But let's say you block with the bishop. Blocking with the bishop is okay, but still, it's not the greatest square for the bishop. Queen d4, the queen will be nicely centralized, and black doesn't want to play this. So here Petrosian doesn't mind trading queens. We have queen to d7, and now Fischer doesn't capture on d7, but rather he plays rook to e1. He sees that after Petrosian captures, which he did, Petrosian capture, Fischer captured here. He does have a knight on a4, but this will be actually a very nicely placed knight, an excellently placed knight, if you will. Bishop to e6 by Petrosian, bishop to e3 by Fischer, we have castles, and now bishop to c5. It's a very strong square for the bishop, and now if Petrosian would trade bishops here, then you have knight captures on c5. So we have rook f to e8, Petrosian rather defends his bishop, we have bishop captures, rook captures, and now b4. An excellent move. Now if you check out the position on the board, the material is completely equal. But one big difference is Fischer has two connected pawns on the queen side, and of course at some point you know that a4 and b5 is coming, and one of these pawns will definitely become a passed pawn. And on the other hand, Petrosian has two isolated pawns, which are not all that easily defendable. So by playing b4, Fischer already started his expansion on the queen side, and also he created a nice outpost for his knight on c5, which is a nice dark square. So okay, king to f8, Petrosian starts bringing his king into the game, knight to c5, as we already discussed, which is again a great move. Threatening to capture the bishop here. Also, there is a double attack against the a6 pawn here. So bishop to c8 is what Petrosian played. a5 isn't all that great because after a5, white can immediately push b5, and already Fischer has a passed pawn on the queen side, and whatever black plays, even a4 is coming, and then this b5 pawn becomes a protected passed pawn. You don't even have to calculate anything here to decide. You do not want white to already have a protected passed pawn on the queen side. So knight to c5, and now bishop to c8. Petrosian has to go back with the bishop to protect the a6 pawn. Now you can see that the a6 pawn is in fact very weak. f3. Fischer simply improves his position, doesn't give this knight any squares, and prepares some nice squares for his king to enter the game. Rook to a7. The idea is he wants to give more protection to this a6 pawn to perhaps activate his bishop. Rook to e5. This is an excellent move by Fischer. It really creates sort of a zugzwang for black, because there really aren't all that many moves he can do. You can't move the knight, you have to protect this pawn. If you move back with the rook, then you pretty much admit that your last move wasn't all that great. For example, rook e7, then you get rook e1, simply captures, and after rook to a7, it's all right, but white can simply ignore you and continue with his ideas on the queen side. But it wouldn't be so terrible. After rook to e5, we have knight to bishop to d7. Petrosian now tries to activate his bishop, as he already did place his rooks here to protect the a6 pawn. We have knight to d7 now. This is the move that was discussed for so long, and the idea behind this move is that Fischer has a monster knight on c5, and this bishop here isn't really all that impressive. Like, it's not really doing anything, it's not really going anywhere. After bishop d7, there are a couple of moves you can play here. For example, you can go rook to c1. The most a reasonable move would be simply a4, not allow bishop to b5, and you simply continue the game. For example, a5, b5 is coming. Again, this bishop doesn't really have any good squares. If rook to c7 attacking the knight, then even rook to c1, you simply continue the game, and it seems like a very nice position for white. But in fact, this move Fischer played after this bishop to d7, after this knight captures on d7, like, there wasn't a grandmaster watching this game that wasn't like, totally, what is Fischer doing? I actually found a very nice comment on chessgames.com. I even prepared it here. There you have it, by a user offramp. So feel free to pause the video here and read this comment, because it kind of perfectly illustrates what kind of atmosphere this knight captures on d7 created. So I'll give you a couple of seconds if you want to read it. For those of you who have read it, once again, congratulations, you are an excellent subscriber. And, well, there isn't for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, because if you read it, you have enjoyed the show already. So, okay, knight captures on d7, we have rook captures on d7, and now rook to c1. Here you can see the idea behind behind Fischer's knight captures on d7. Fischer now controls the only two open files on the board, the e file and the c file. Another thing, black still doesn't have all that many moves he can play. He can't really move this rook away from the a file because this rook has to keep an eye on the a6 pawn. You can't really move the knight as there are no squares where you can move it to, and you can't, for example, move this rook away from the 8th rank because you're gonna get checkmated here. So not a lot of moves here to try. Here Petrosian tried rook to d6. He introduces another defender of the a6 pawn and perhaps can activate his rook via rook to e8. Fischer plays rook to c7. Now bringing a rook to the 7th rank is always excellent. The other rook can now come perhaps to e7. And here again it's not all that easy to decide what to do here. If you go something like rook to e8, then you get rook captures, king captures, and rook to a7. And there's no way for you to protect the a6 pawn. On the other hand, if you try something like rook to e6 to trade here, you're getting rook captures, pawn captures, and again, you still have to keep an eye on this a6 pawn, and Fischer will simply waltz in with the king to the middle of the board and win the game. So Petrosian tries a different idea. He goes knight to d7. What's the idea here? Well, of course, Fischer's rook on e5 is attacked, so you have to move it. Fischer moves it rook to e2, and now g6, creating some breathing space for the king, as Petrosian is aware of some back rank mates that are possible in the position if he moves the rook. King to f2, Fischer simply starts bringing his king into the game. We have h5, we have f4, h4, and now king to f3. f5, and here king to e3. Fischer starts bringing his king into the center of the board. Here you don't really gain anything with rook to e6 and exchanging rooks. For example, king d4 captures, and now let's say you go knight f6. You have to move the knight. Your knight is under attack. King comes into the game. You have to move the knight, and now simply captures, and now we have an easily winning game for white. So, after king to e3, we have d4 with check. King to d2, and now, there really isn't a move you can play here. Once again, you have to keep an eye on the a6 pawn. You can't really move the knight anywhere. Well, it can go to b6, which was played in the game. You can't move the rook anywhere. The rook has to keep an eye on the knight. You can't bring the king closer because this rook is controlling the file. Moves like king to f7 are pretty much pointless. You're just pinned here. White will simply continue with his plan of pushing the pawns on the queen side. So Petrosian tries knight to b6. Fischer takes this opportunity and brings his other rook over to e7. And okay, although knight to d5 was played here, Fischer's rooks are now forked, but it doesn't really matter. Rook to f7 check was played, king to e8, and now comes rook to b7. A very nice move. And here, Petrosian played knight captures on f4. After this, the game is completely lost, but one way you could have tried to defend is rook to b8, but still it would have been very difficult. Now, of course, if you capture, then black will capture your rook on f7, so let's say rook to a7. And now, for example, if knight captures on b4, you can't really afford grabbing any pieces here or pawns because rook to h7, and you can't defend checkmate here. For example, rook to f6 to try and block this, but again, you get bishop to c4. Which is the kind of the whole point of this position. Rook to f8, simply rook e7 check, king moves, now bishop to e6 comes, and whatever you play, you're getting checkmated. Doesn't really matter. One thing you could have tried after rook to a7, instead of knight captures on b4, for example, knight back to f6, but still, you get a3, and still black wouldn't really have anything to do here. Bishop would still come to c2 to c2 to b3, and you would again control this diagonal, and the winning plan would still be the same. So after this rook to b7 move, Petrosian did not play a rook to b8, rather he played knight captures on f4, and here we have bishop to c4. And after this bishop to c4 move, Petrosian saw that there was nothing he could do, and in this position he resigned the game. So yeah, why did he resign? Well, there's really nothing to do here. Rook to h7 followed by rook h8 is the threat. There's no way to avoid this. Whatever you try, for example, knight to e6, if you try knight to e6 to control the f8 square, you simply get rook to e7 check. And now you're going to lose the knight. After king moves, you can simply capture here, and that's over. Another thing, after this bishop to c4, you can try Instead of knight to e6, perhaps knight to d5. Now you lose in a different way, simply bishop captures on d5. Rook captures and rook to h7, and now there is no move that prevents rook to h8. Well, there are silly moves, but we're not going to take those into consideration. So yeah, after bishop to c4, this is move 34, Petrosian resigned to the game, and the result is now 4.5 to 2.5 in Fischer's favor, and now things are already much different, and Petrosian will no longer have the opportunity of playing safe for a draw. Rather, he will have to try to come back in this match. How things will, turn out, you'll just have to follow this entire match and see what happens. So yeah, it's very interesting how this entire match is going so far. So first, we have game 1 where Petrosian was better, and then he lost without being able to reach time control. Then in game 2, he completely crushes Fischer. Game 3, again, Petrosian is better, but Fischer draws. Then we have a quick game, then a really combative game, but also ends in a draw. Fischer never really better in this match. Then we have the previous game where Petrosian chooses a really weird, not weird, but a passive Reti approach, and Fischer completely crushes him in this positional masterpiece. And then when Fischer has the white pieces, he creates yet another positional masterpiece. And now, well, I think this was one of Tigran's worst matches in his life, with so much at the stake. So yeah. That's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I do hope you're enjoying the Bobby Fischer series so far. I would like to thank Andrew Clinton, Rashadat Gadmaliev, Professor Dr. Michael Marin, Admiral Snackbar, and Carl Dieter for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you soon, hopefully with some more interesting content, and we can check out this nice comment about knight captures on d7 for the end of this video once more. There you have it. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you soon.